Welcome everyone to the September board meeting of Ignite CDA, Coeur d'Alene's Urban Renewal Agency. If you would all stand and help me do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have on the agenda now open for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the board meeting minutes from last August 19th.
I'll make a motion to approve August 19th, 2020 board meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion, corrections? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
I'd make a motion to approve the August 25th, 2020 special call board meeting minutes.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Presentation, La Crosse Avenue Extension Project. Chris, please come forward.
Thank you, Chairman and Ignite CDA Board, for having me before you tonight. Today. It's dark out. So tonight I'm here to request some money for our La Crosse Avenue project. And first thing I'd like to do is kind of go through the history of where this project has appeared. The first is the Atlas Mill Site Traffic Study, and that was one of the recommendations from the traffic study to extend La Crosse out from Beebe Boulevard in Riverstone out to Northwest Boulevard and signalize at that intersection. This is the necessary third ingress and egress for Riverstone that we haven't accomplished yet, and it also helps to mitigate traffic and spread it out so that it's not all congested in the same places. The next location that this appeared was actually quite a few years earlier. It was in the BLM Corridor Four Corners Master Plan, and in that study, it was shown as La Crosse coming in and going directly down to Bellerive with a parking lot. That would be a gated entrance, and that was just a emergency ingress egress for fire, essentially. But the parking lot that is planned there is to serve a multitude of different city park features that were planned out, like micro soccer and pickleball courts and things like that. So coming up to current day here, this is a subdivision plan that was submitted to the city of Coeur d'Alene by Active West, and this was their original PUD request that they put together. And we had some comments on it because I really didn't want, if La Crosse is going to extend from Northwest Boulevard into Bellerive or into Riverstone, I didn't want it going straight to Beebe Boulevard, because once traffic gets there, it's going to have to go up to Riverstone Drive, and then from there we would probably necessitate having to build a traffic circle or something to manage traffic at that intersection. So, and the other request I had for them was to straighten out this Beebe Boulevard crossing of the Centennial Trail, and I'll show you more on that in just a moment here. But here is the revised subdivision, and taking my comments into consideration, they brought this back to us and we accepted it, and this was bringing the, oh, my mouse is not going where I want it to, bringing the Centennial Trail crossing to a perpendicular crossing straight across Beebe Boulevard so that it's not that diagonal crossing. And then as I mentioned before, about the lacrosse coming into BB Boulevard, I was able to work with their designers to get it curved to go up Lakewood, where Lakewood has a signal with Riverstone Drive. So that would much better manage traffic and try to discourage those cars from going down to BB Boulevard unless that is really their intent or where they want to go. So overall, this map shows this blue outline area here is that Active West development that is currently under construction today with BB Boulevard right here. And out here at Northwest Boulevard, this is the lacrosse intersection. And so this was our concept of how we would bring it in and tie into the end of their development. And then zooming in a little bit here, you can see coming off of their development, we would have some room for parking along the side of the park area that we were proposing because of the BLM corridor plan. And then also a parking lot with that connection into Bellerive that would be for emergency use only. And then I've shown we've got a path along the side of this with a connection down to the Centennial Trail, and then this intersection would be signalized. And while I'm talking about the intersection, I should mention one of the real reasons for having a signalized intersection there. Once you pass Lakewood Drive intersection going down Northwest Boulevard, the next opportunity for someone to cross, especially on a pedestrian or a bicyclist to cross Northwest Boulevard, is at Hubbard down by the wastewater treatment plant. That's a pretty big stretch. And La Crosse actually just to the east here goes up to Winton Elementary School. So it seems like we need a safer crossing for school kids going in that direction or people who are living up there to get down to our parks. And so this was a close-up of what we have out there at that BB Boulevard intersection. And so this crossing, as you can see, is in a really bad angle here, and we've gotten many calls on when are you going to fix that? That's dangerous. And so that was why we arrived at this design with Active West. Part of my request for funding on this is actually to cover this side of BB Boulevard. Active West was totally on board with making that connection to Lakewood like I requested and doing what they could at the Centennial Trail, but their property ends at BB Boulevard, and so they felt like it was going a bit beyond what they were required to do by crossing the street and doing improvements on someone else's property over there. So I've gotten a cost estimate from them for that work, and I've included that in my request to you. And so here is my my full request, what I was looking for. Well, this is actually the wrong sheet, but so I'll just explain what is pulled out of here. But the sewer extension, water extension, and stormwater improvements, which total about $2 million or $200,000, we've pulled those out and put those as, well, the city can have some skin in the game, as you like to see us have on these projects. And so with that, it brings the total down to actually 1.8 million, not the 2 million that's shown on this slide here. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Oh, I was just going to say, can you go over exactly, maybe in a little bit more detail, which improvements? So you're talking about the intersection at Northwest Boulevard. You're talking about
That this project would include?
Yeah.
Yes.
The 1.8 million.
Yes. So the 1.8 million would include that where, so Active West leaves off right here, and that's where this is, and we pick up, and it would be for all of this infrastructure here out to Northwest Boulevard, including a signal at that intersection, and then that little piece of fixing the trail on the opposite side just to make that situation a little bit safer.
Okay, I thought you were talking about the whole thing. I just want to make sure.
No, Active West has this part under construction today, and they're getting they're getting near the end of that. So our idea is that if we're granted this funding, we would perform the design this fall, go out to bid for construction this winter, and then have it constructed next summer. And then Active West will be done by that time.
Chris, I've got two questions. First
Yes.
of all, on that map right there, so La Crosse will tie into Lakewood, is that correct? Will it,
Correct, yes,
is there going to be a street that continues east or west of there then, that will service Active West property?
Yes, let's see here.
So will that
This
be a-
is a close-up right here of that design.
So will that be a dead end?
This street here?
Yes.
No, that will actually connect to BB Boulevard. So people will be able to use it, but it'll be a residential street, and it actually,
It still will go all the way through?
yes.
Because you were saying earlier you didn't want it to connect to BB.
Well, I want to discourage traffic from heading down to BB Boulevard.
But it will
So-
connect though?
It will connect, and Active West has designed, actually at my request also, was the Centennial Trail connection comes down here. And so they put a curb extension in there for traffic calming, and they're building a raised crossing there. So there will be some traffic calming elements, and then there will be on-street parking for their use along here that will help to slow traffic through there. So my idea is to try to encourage people to go up to Lakewood where that signal is to get into Riverstone.
Second question is go back to the BB Boulevard slide you had on the Centennial Trail. The other direction.
Yeah.
So is that going to be a 90-degree, so you're going to come across, it slants down this way now, or is it going to come across and then 90 degrees straight down?
It would come straight here across this where that parking lot area is, and then come up this way before
So
connecting
it'll be
to
a
it.
fairly sharp turn right there on the east side of the street.
Yes, on both sides there will be, yeah, we'll have to work out just to make it a little bit smoother there, but we want people to slow down before they cross the street anyway, because that's one of the complaints we get is that people don't even look and then they just head straight across BB Boulevard.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Chris, could you go over the Lakewood connection one more time?
Yes.
I know you have, but I just want to understand how, so Active West is going to pay for that connection, and that's going to be a city street that connects into Lakewood?
Yes. So right now Lakewood stops right about here, and they're actually tearing out a little bit more to narrow that down a little bit. And the reason why we had to narrow that down was just to fit within the available right-of-way there. But I actually went over to the designer's office and sat down with him at his AutoCAD station and helped him figure this out so that we could make it work, because they weren't sure that it would. But we were able to work together and get that to work. So they will have this constructed all the way out to here for us to connect to.
So you said that street that goes in front of those lots, along those lots, you're going to discourage traffic there. It seems to me that if you're coming from the south, I mean, and you're going to want to get over to, if you're going to want to get to the park, or you're going to want to get to, say, La Peep, or any of
Yes.
those places, that you're going to be using that road.
Yes, you probably would be, and that's perfectly acceptable because that would be your destination. What I'm trying to avoid is people going down to BB Boulevard, turning right, getting up to Riverstone, and then backing up traffic at that intersection.
All right, thank
Chris,
you.
what's the width of that? I mean, so you're going to have on-street parking and, you see there's a trail on the north side there?
There is a sidewalk on the north side of theirs. We have a trail planned on our side of it. It's actually, no, I'm sorry, the trail is on the south side until we get to this connection down to the Centennial Trail. There's just a sidewalk on the north side connecting to their sidewalk. The width of ours, I believe the concept design was 24 feet curb to curb to try to keep traffic going reasonably slow there. It gets much wider in this area for the parking and to have some room to back out before backing right into the lane. The design of this was actually modeled after what we have on Fork Rounds Drive down by the city park, as far as the room available for parking and backing out before you get into the travel lane.
Brad?
So I got a couple questions for you.
Mhm.
Do you have any estimated trips per day traffic usage on this intersection? I mean, it seems like a lot of money for this intersection that isn't going to carry that much traffic. I understand there's other reasons for it.
I don't know what those numbers are from the traffic study. But one of the, I guess, the right things to do as far as traffic management is to get people to seek alternative routes so that not everybody's going to the Lakewood Northwest Boulevard intersection. We get complaints about that as it is, and we've already improved it as one of the recommendations from that traffic study, working with ITD to take over control of those signals. But a signalized intersection can only hold so much. And so another problem that we have at that location is the people who are coming into Riverstone from the south, they all queue up to turn left onto Lakewood. And that queue backs up quite a ways. And we've helped manage that by having a flashing yellow light, a permissive left during off-peak times, but there are times when it still gets pretty backed up. And what should happen is that as people get familiar with this, there will be more people peeling off here instead of going up there and taking their chances at that intersection.
Yeah, that usually happens. People get used to that. But I just question, the street seems so narrow. Is that intersection going to help a lot, you think, with that small of a street that it's feeding into there?
Well, the width of the street isn't going to affect the capacity of the street much, but it is going to affect their speeds. And we do want to keep the speeds slow because of the on-street parking and because of the park elements that will be created there in the future.
Okay, I've just got one other question for you. And I know this intersection's a priority with Public Works, but and of course, we got a lot of places we can put money to benefit the public in this district here, and we're, running short out of dollars that are going to be coming in. But let me just ask you this, and this is just in general. So we're in some real unusual times right now. We got the Congress meeting, and there's debate about more COVID relief packages and help for infrastructure and things like that. I mean, is the city in general going to be, and are they, watching for things? If money comes available through a new CARES Act or anything the Congress does, and we can go out, the city can get that money and has shovel-ready projects, then this money could go somewhere else, or are we watching for that in general?
Well,
Troy's pretty sharp at that, so I imagine he is.
Yeah, I know he is watching for money through the CARES Act and other places as well, but my thoughts on that are that it would be a tough sell to ask for money for COVID relief on a traffic mitigation measure when traffic is actually down to about 80% of normal because of COVID right now. We're in the middle of another traffic study for the health corridor, and traffic is all over the place. Some places have increased traffic, but in general, it's down to 80% of normal.
Yeah, right now, I understand it's really hard to get a baseline when you're trying to plan for things, because we know the 80% of normal won't last. That'll be picking up. And I guess I understand you can't take money for COVID relief and build a street, but I'm just saying you don't know what the Congress is going to throw together. There may be money for infrastructure to help cities or job creation, who knows what. So I'm just hoping if there is eligible money, I'm not saying do anything dishonest. I'm just saying keep an eye on it if there is eligible money that comes out of the federal government. I think, for instance, the Government Way project was some Obama shovel-ready money that was done years ago. Government Way out by Silver Lake Mall, I think that qualified for that, as I recall, or a stretch of that. So I hope we're watching for things like that. So, the more, and there's a lot of debate about taking federal money and different things, but if it's out there and other cities are taking it, I just think, it lessens the load on the local taxpayers here, so I just hope we're watching for that.
Yeah, I agree. And it is money well spent for us to, generally a federal project has like a 7.34% local match. And that's just a
pretty
great
good.
use of our money to do that. So we're always looking for that.
All right,
Livia?
thanks.
Chris, is this project in your SIP, and if so, what funding mechanisms were tied to it?
This project hasn't been identified in any of those, other than that it came out as a result of the Atlas traffic study as a mitigation mitigation item that would be needed to help with the congestion out there.
So it wasn't planned for, but has become more of a priority in dues time?
Correct, yes.
So Chris, this 1.8 million includes the signal and all the work out on Northwest Boulevard, rebuilding Lacrosse into there, the parking lot, the ingress egress for the emergency access, and then building the road and sidewalk and parking all the way up to the Active West.
Correct, yes.
Chris, what's your time frame on this?
Well, we would like to get it designed this fall, bid it this winter, and construct it in the spring, starting in the spring, and hopefully finished up by this time next year.
Any further discussion? Mr. Burns?
Can I ask one question? Can you go to your trail alignment? It's on. It is on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. We got you. Okay. The traffic alignment slide showing on the west side of Beebe,
Which slide?
where the trail alignment slide on the west side of Beebe, where you're gonna bring it
Oh,
across.
this right here?
Yeah, you had a little,
Oh, I had the one with the photos also, yes. Right here.
yes.
Yep.
So later this afternoon, the board's going to be chatting about what to do with our remnant railroad right-of-way property to the west of Beebe.
Yes.
So will that bulb out impact, the design that you have, will that impact the right-of-way that we have on fronting Beebe? We just have to be mindful of that because the board's going to decide.
Right, and this was the design that was proposed by Active West. So when we go into actual design, we can change this around. It just needs to fit with what they've got across the street here. So there is a lot of flexibility in that. We just want to improve that crossing.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve funding, Ignite funding of $1.8 million for the Lacrosse Avenue Extension Project.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? That's not to exceed 1.8 million? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Chris, thanks a million. 0.8. Next, committee presentations, finance, Mr. Arman.
Relatively short financial report today. Starting out with the Lake District balance sheet. The Lake District experienced $442,689 decrease in cash assets from July month end. In the receivables in the Lake District, due to the Atlas District, $953 increase from July month end, reflecting Atlas District's share of G&A costs. Fixed assets, no change. Other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account had an increase of $68 for the month of August. And the liabilities and fund balance, no bonds, no changes, and all other liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit due to the yards line item due to the county increment check received in August. Lake District P&L revenues, Lake District received $12,897 in tax increment revenue from the county in August. Expenditures, agency-funded initiatives, Atlas Waterfront Project, $342,793, the breakdown of which was such: Welsh-Comer Team, $23,276, and Tila Riviere Contracting, $319,517. Special Project Reserve, $100,109 is a reimbursement to the City of Coeur d'Alene for the Northwest Boulevard Traffic Signal Coordination Initiative. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with normal operating month. Moving on to the River District balance sheet, assets. The River District experienced a $270,231 decrease in cash assets from the month end of July. Atlas deposit receivable of $89,500 increase due to additional loan funds to the Atlas District for mill site project at work. Other assets were no change. Liabilities and fund balance, all liability parameters are either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit to the due to arts line item due to the county August increment check. In the River District P&L revenues, the River District received $1,597 in tax increment revenue from the county in August. Developer cost reimbursements, $23,000 from Area 6, $23,000 total. Area 6 was $6,600, and Area 10 was $16,400. These are fees paid to Ignite by Atlas project developers for civil design work. Ignite will in turn pay Welchcomer to perform the civil design work for these areas. Expenditures, agency-funded initiatives, Atlas Phase 1 waterfront project, a total of $187,679. Breakdown, Welchcomer team $24,794. Tila Riviera contracting, waterfront project $52,014. And Tila Riviera contracting Phase 1 $98,620. Also, Kootenai Title for $12,250 for the Atlas site title insurance. Professional fees line items was higher than usual due to the work of Holly Troxell on the Atlas project. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with normal operating month, with 45% of G&A cost share with expenses. Last but not least, the Atlas District balance sheet assets. The Atlas District experienced $13 increase in cash assets from July month end. Liabilities and fund balance, due to the River District, $89,500 increase due to additional loan funds received from the River District. Due to the Lake District, $953 increase for G&A costs. The Atlas District P&L revenues, Atlas District received no dollars in tax increment revenue from the county in August. And the expenditures, agency-funded initiatives, Stimson Mill Site Atlas Project Phase 1, total of $89,487. The breakdown was such. Welchcomer team, $43,077, and Tila Riviera contracting Phase 1, $46,410. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with the normal operating month with 5% G&A cost share of expenses. That is the financials for the month of September.
Thank you.
August, I guess. Moving on to payables. First payable was to Elam Burke for $100, and this was for the River URD on the Atlas project. Second payable was for $8,790 to Holly Troxell. It was $1,656 general legal counsel. $90 was for the Midtown DDA, and $7,044 for the River URD Atlas project A&Es, DDAs, and Master Association documents and title work. I'm just going to deviate for a second here and just say Danielle should be complimented immensely for the amount of work she's putting in on this. The amount of work that Tony and Danielle are doing to get these documents put in place is tremendous. And I think we owe them a great amount of gratitude for what they're doing to get this project going. The third line item is the City of Coeur d'Alene Arts Commission, a total of $134,917. And just for those people out there that are watching this, every month when I read off the financials, I read it says including the 2% credit to due to arts line item. This is accrued every month, and we pay it at every 6 months, correct, Tony? And this is the payment for this time. And the total amount is the Lake District Public Art dollar transfer is $104,855. The River District Public Art transfer is $30,015, and the Atlas District Public Art transfer is $47. So $134,917 will be transferred to the Art Commission for the future funding going forward. The next line item is the City of Coeur d'Alene, Ignite Coeur d'Alene board meetings broadcast for fiscal year 20 of $1,200. Next line item is ICREMP, which is for our insurance for the first half payment for $3,525. Then Health Corridor Traffic Study for Dowell Consultants, invoice number 1, $7,136.90. And then the Atlas Mill Site Initiative funds are coming out still. First one is for the Welshcomer Team, amendment number 7, for waterfront construction services for $44,443.75. Welshcomer Team Amendment Number 8, Phase 1, Infrastructure Design and Final Plat, $925. Welshcomer Team Amendment Number 9, Phase 1, Heartland for A&Es and DDAs and Welshcomer fees, a total of $7,843.91. Welshcomer Team Amendment Number 10 for Area 10 Infrastructure, Civil Design Work, $6,560. And last but not least, the largest one is Tila Riviera Construction, once again, Atlas Waterfront Project, $360,664.56. And then an expense we just approved last month for Northern States Security for Atlas Mill Site Security, $3,239.66. Total for the Atlas Mill Site Initiative, $423,676.88. Total monthly payables for this month, $579,345.78. Questions?
Mr. Harmon? A couple things, probably questions for Tony, not directly related to this, but the city approved the tax relief from the governor, and that's going to come on this next tax bill. Have you been in contact with the Kootenai County Treasurer on how that's going to play out for Ignite? They don't know for sure how it's going to play out, so I would imagine there's going to have to be some conversations there, because everyone's going to see a credit on their tax bill in the city of Coeur d'Alene as property owners that are in the urban renewal district. So I was just kind of wanted to know if you've had any conversations yet on how that was going to play out.
Yes, we have. We've been working with the Tax Commission on trying to make the Ignite, or the urban renewal agencies across the state, whole on this. And there was efforts underway to make the districts whole, and I just found out this morning that those efforts might not be happening. So we're not quite sure if the different taxing entities like the city or the county take these funds and property taxes and levy rates are affected, will we be made whole? Is still up in the air.
Because that would, it's about a 20% reduction in the city of Coeur d'Alene's property taxes. So if you ever want to look at their bill, the city of Coeur d'Alene, it's proposed that they're going to get a 20% one-time, this year only credit. So I would hope that however that's put together would make, because the city is going to be made whole on that amount, and maybe of that $5.7 million, some of that comes back to the city and some of it goes to Ignite. I'm not sure exactly how it is, but I would just advise to be closely monitoring that to make sure, because that would put a hole in your budget.
Yeah, a big hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're mindful of that, and like I said, there's efforts underway to make statewide decisions on that, but I think they're in flux.
Yeah. And then the other question I had, with the Lake District closing next year and the transfer of money to the arts, can that money that sits in the Coeur d'Alene Arts Commission for the Lake District, can that continue on past the life of the district, or does that money need to be utilized before the district sunsets?
It can go beyond
It can go.
the term of the district, because it's transferred, it's spent for our purposes and transferred to the Arts Commission Fund.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One point we should make, though, too, is that for this next fiscal year, instead of 2%, it's going to be 1% going forward for the Arts Commission. So just to let everybody know that.
Any further discussion, questions? Need a motion to accept the financials and payables as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks, Mr. Arman. Parking, Commissioner Jordan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Today, Commissioner Chapkus, who is also on the Parking Commission and the esteemed chairman of the Parking Commission, is going to give the report.
I am. Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. Well, we had a quorum, which was nice. We hadn't for a couple months prior. We also put together a 3-person panel to review signage in town, to get some uniformity downtown. These are primarily parking signage. We put together a report and submitted it to the city administrator for review and on to council. We did see an increase in revenue. We saw $8,600 increase from this month from last month. Total revenue, in July we saw an increase of $21,400 for parking revenue. And as far as passes, our permits for the parking garage in July were 261. In August, it dropped by 9 to 252. And for the annual, the city residents, we have 179 permits, which brought in $1,253 in revenue. And county residents, 72 for $1,224 in revenue. And that's all I have.
Good, thank you. Questions for Jim? Okay. Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, can you give me control of the screen or bring up my PowerPoint slide, please, presentation, please? So I just wanted to talk about the agency's Riverstone Bellerive Railroad right-of-way ownership issue. Who's driving the train here? That was kind of centered before, but what I want to kind of just go over, just give everybody the idea of the geography that we're talking about. So the red area is depicting the agency's railroad right-of-way located behind the Bellerive establishment and below the Riverstone Park area, going west from Beebe up to our new Atlas project site area. So we've talked about this in the past, and I just wanted to kind of make sure everybody remembers the geography that we're talking about. So in July, Mr. Boyd, kind of after some input from board members, came up with an idea for utilizing this property for a parking solution, public parking as depicted on this slide, going from Beebe Boulevard over towards the junction with our Atlas project area. So this was one idea for the board's consideration for possible use of this property. Then last month, we had a visit from some owners and some stakeholders in the community that thought that maybe they'd be interested in buying this property from the agency and combining it with property along the Spokane River to create some deeper lots on the west end, as well as maybe a public parking solution on the east end along Beebe. So just another idea in the ideation process for the board's consideration. So at last month's board meeting, the board didn't have quite enough board members to really have a good conversation about this, and they asked that this topic be brought forward to this board meeting. And as I shared last month, the options that I see for the board regarding this railroad right-of-way property asset is to basically do nothing, and we can gift the property to the city of Coeur d'Alene for their future use. We can move forward with the proposed public parking amenity as presented in July. You can consider declaring the railroad property surplus, get an appraisal and sell the property via sealed bid auction to the open market, or consider issuing a request for proposals for development of the railroad right-of-way property. The board would then choose a proposal and sell the property to the developer at a fair use value that may or not be market value. Those are the four options that I think the board have at this time for conversation, and I just wanted to kind of open it up for board consideration. It is listed as an action item, but you don't have to take action on it tonight if you don't wish, but if you do want to move forward, then you do have the ability to do so.
Sorry, can you repeat the second option?
Second option would be to move forward with the proposed public parking amenity concept as presented in July.
Steve?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess I would prefer doing the RFP because that gives the board some control over what could be there and also could potentially generate some revenue back to the board, so we have a choice. We also have the choice if we do an RFP and if we don't get anything we like, we could turn it down. I mean, we might get a fantastic proposal that we really like. I mean, I actually like their proposal, but there could be other proposals, so I would be in favor of putting out an RFP and have Tony, I don't know, Tony, if you could just create that and bring that back to the board, or create it and just put it out. I don't know how that process works, but that's what I would be in favor of. I think that brings the most options for the board and still gives us control of what goes in that area.
Jim?
Have we had an appraisal on that property yet, or do we intend to?
No, we have not had an appraisal on that, that piece of property, and depending on which venue you choose, we would or we might not need to get an appraisal.
So if we went forward with the RFP, we would need an appraisal?
No, not necessarily. Not at this time. You would need a reuse appraisal once you pick a developer for that, to determine the land value. If you were to sell it on the open market going surplus, then you need an appraisal up front.
Thank you.
Olivia?
I concur with Commissioner Widmeyer. I think in order to try to get the highest and best use for that property, I think that would be the best and most logical, and the possibility of bringing back revenue to the district.
I too agree with that, because then we have control over it. And can the RFP state they need to work with Chris to get that street crossing? And it'd be great if it was all designed at once.
I would just suggest that if you have thoughts on what you want to see in that RFP, the more specificity we can provide in terms of what you're considering for a project. I mean, are you thinking retail? Are you thinking parking? Are you thinking, more park? Are you thinking housing? It would be helpful if we just open it up and say, we can do that. It's just we maybe get more focused responses that you're going to like better if we have more specificity.
Do you really think we're going to get more than one response with, as small as that is? I mean, if you get it too specific, you're going to basically eliminate the property owners that have the property abutting it. At least that's my opinion. Unless you specifically make it so they fits their need.
I think it would be helpful to maybe talk with Hillary and Chris and get some maybe parameters from them as to what, because they have the bigger picture of what the overall look for the mill site as well as some of the other areas.
Sounds like an ad hoc committee is about to form.
I agree with Commissioner Metz, though. I think that's wise.
Daniel, I do have a question though. I mean, if we do make it fairly specific as far as the qualifications for that, and does it start to look like we're making it so that only a certain number of bidders can be bidding on it based upon the property that's owned on both sides?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't make it specific enough that it's just that project. I guess I just was saying any information you can give us on what you think the highest and best use of that land is will help us gear in the drafting of the RFP, gear it towards what we want. So if you want a project similar to what they're proposing, I don't think we'd want to, I guess we have to weigh that. You're right. I mean, we don't want it geared just towards that.
Right. I mean, a month ago, they came and proposed what they thought would be 2 or 3 different, scenarios there, particularly for the eastern side of that, which gives us a little bit of an understanding of what they were looking at. Some of you weren't here last month and saw the proposals that they had. But, I'm agreeable. I think we should go with an RFP and see what we come back with.
I think too, in the way I understand this reuse appraisal is that they have to put something in there that would be for the good of the public. If they put something in there that's for public use, then that reuse appraisal is less than fair market value. Is that kind of the way that works, Tony?
Could be.
Danielle?
Right. I mean, the use is definitely going to dictate the fair use appraisal, because the fair use appraisal is designed to enable the developer to make the project work in a scenario where it might not work otherwise, right? So if we're selling it for a fair use appraisal price, they're more likely to be able to give some of the property to the public or utilize it for public purposes. That's not always the case, right? I mean, we had to do fair use appraisals with Atlas, and they're paying full, market value, and there's not public benefit to their individual areas, so, but if the more public, probably the lower the fair use appraisal price is going to be.
So if somebody came in there and said, okay, we're gonna create public parking, like in this drawing, where there's gonna be public parking, there's 2 pickleball courts that are available for public use, and then the other property there is going to be for some private development, that would offset the market value cost in a reuse appraisal. Yeah.
Good point.
What's the timeline on this?
The timeline is for you to set. I mean, this is the board's decision. I mean, this property parcel was kind of sitting idle until the past few months, until the board kind of had some ideas coming towards them. So it's yours to call.
And what is the size of the parcel? Do we know?
I do not have that square footage. It's 60 foot wide in depth, and I don't know the length of it offhand.
I'm sure Phil could probably give us a ball.
As long as, you know,
In the case of an RFP, is an applicant able to submit more than one proposal? So if there's a group that is interested in floating some test balloons with a couple different ideas, are there restrictions about how many proposals?
There's no statutory restriction, no.
Do a couple of people want to get together and do what Danielle suggested, put some ideas together of what we want, or?
I guess I would make a motion to, Tony, would you want to bring, if you created an RFP, I forget it, do you then bring that back to the board?
Yes.
So I would make a motion to direct the executive director to create an RFP for the Riverstone Belle Reeve right-of-way ownership project.
I'd second that.
And that will include what Danielle's outlining?
Sure.
Further discussion?
Do we want to amend that to be in consultation with the planning department?
Sure.
So that it meets city
Yeah.
objectives?
Yeah, I
Engage
would
the
agree
city.
with that.
You definitely engage the city engineering department. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tony.
Mr. Chairman, next on the agenda is Atlas project update, and invite Mr. Phil Boyd to join the board meeting.
Thank you, Tony, Chairman Hoskins, and board members.
Hello, Phil.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. So my monthly update. Today I'm going to cover the park project, give you an update on the park project. I'm also going to talk about Phase 1, which remember that's the development area, the upland portion of it. There's also 2 action items for the board's consideration, the engineering construction phase services and the Atlas master plan and the financial model update now that the triangle parcel is in play. Hooray. In the project progress in the park, 99% of the concrete flat work is completed, the irrigation system is done, the Avista power is into the site, thank goodness, and the log boom has been installed. So those are all positive things. The ongoing work is the building interiors. What you'll see more obviously, if you happen to go down to the site, is the tree planting. Although you can't go to the site, just look from the Prairie Trail. Because La Riviere's fence is up there, and it has been doing a good job. The security that the board talked about and authorized funding for, which Bill Greenwood has a question I know on that later, is also doing a good job. So there were quite a few incidents, and apparently there still are incidences occurring when people get into the site. Just on the weekends, when the contractor opens up the gate, up on Celtice, people sneak in there and ride their bikes down there. But it's making a positive impact. And then obviously the hydroseeding work, and I'll show you some photographs here. This is the playground that Bill's crew, the city crew, is installing, and I think the board might remember that this was some action that Bill took on himself to save some funding for the project. Ignite funded the purchase of the equipment, but Bill's crew is doing the installation. This is just a photograph of Avista down there putting up the parking lot light poles. This is a cost-effective way to do lighting both from the beginning of the project up front. It's a lower cost because Avista to some extent subsidizes the cost, and then the city has a lower power cost over time as well. And you can see the parking lots finished in this area. You guys can probably figure out when that picture was taken. The smoke in the background. You can see the hydroseeding here in the riparian zone and some of the plantings occurring here. This is the pedestrian path, and the paved path is up here for the wheeled vehicles, bikes. This is one of the last concrete pours, and this is obviously right here at the restroom picnic shelter area. This is another picnic area or another concrete pour in the most western water access. So you can see the stairs that go down here. This is actually a street crossing that is part of phase one, and I'll show you that in a second here. So if you were up in the neighborhood, you would come down here. You could choose to take these stairs down, or if you needed a accessible route, you could come down this way. There's a bench right there, and this area will be heavily landscaped. You can see the Avista lighting in this area as well. These are little smaller pedestrian scale poles. So that's kind of the update on the park project. If there's any questions on that, or I'll keep forging on.
Just one quick question. At some point here, would we be ready for another tour?
Whenever the smoke is cleared, I suppose might be a good time for a tour.
Yeah.
Yep, we can, I think Tony and I could work on coordinating that, because it would be a fun time to go out there now.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Bill, I got a question here. We talked about this at finance yesterday. So the project is set for completion October 1.
Right.
And we're 2 weeks from there roughly right now. And we talked yesterday about the fact that there's probably going to be a punch list this long by the time we're done. What's the thought process of not rushing to October 1 and making sure it gets done appropriately, number one? And number two, I think the fact that they put the fencing around there is excellent. I mean, I think it really does make it look like a work zone. Hopefully it is keeping some people out of there. But we talked yesterday about the idea of possibly not even thinking about opening this up for a while and just keeping it closed, particularly as you're seeing phase one as you're going to go into right now, just going on. Like we were saying yesterday, you hate to have people down there walking around in the park and excavators running right beside them.
Mm-hmm.
There's rot for accidents to happen. And I know I know the city was excited to try to get this open and have it ready for the public this year, but we're now into October, and I think if we can figure out a way to wait until spring, gives the hydroseeding, it gives all the plantings, it gives everything a chance to grab hold, and it also keeps public out of the area until phase one is fully constructed, which is probably going to be early next year. I mean, that's just a thought. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, so you hit a whole bunch of good points there. We actually were having that discussion today. The contractor, particularly, the contractor is obviously a big entity, but Tommy, the owner of the company, he's very focused on trying to get as much of the park open on October 1 as possible. Both Bill and I have some of the same feelings you described, which we're a little bit hesitant to rush it. Because when you rush, sometimes you might be cutting corners or not doing it. And so when we had our construction meeting today, we had this discussion, and the conclusion was, don't rush. Do it right, take your time. But let's talk about next week, is there a way to move some of the fence and open part of the park, particularly the dog park? That's a very big attraction. Mm-hmm. Maybe the fence gets moved back so that portion is opened. Maybe some of the parking lot gets opened up because Suzanne is accessible, but we pull back around the picnic area. Is the playground able to be open? So we're going to revisit that very topic next week, and I think appropriately kind of leave it up to Bill's discretion and his leadership at the city on exactly what they want to do. Does leadership, push really hard and politically we want it open? And I'm not saying that that's the case, but that is sometimes what drives these things a little bit. Or is the decision by leadership to let's take an approach that you described, which is to roll back and wait for it to green up and heal over until next year. And Bill obviously has some strong thoughts about that I'll leave up to him to share with the board. So I think there's a lot of that discussion on, but we wanted to wait a week to get to next week to see where we're at, because La Riviere's landscape crew has moved to 7 days a week, partly because they've just moved to 7 days a week. They were not as far as long as they should be. All their plants will be here tomorrow, and they're now working 7 days a week to get things in the ground. And Bill's been great at formulating other seeding strategies with them to make sure the site's stabilized. And then we'll be doing some overseeding next year there's just been a lot of complexities with the seeding. So it's good observation, and it's on the top of our list of discussions.
Okay.
So the Phase 1 update, the board remembers that we discovered more Phase 1 unsuitable soil, and then we depleted all the on-site borrow sources. And so when that happened, we had contracted with Riviere to be able to import off-site material. Obviously, it costs more to import off-site material. So we could have said, let's just import the off-site material. I had that discussion with the board maybe 2 months ago, or we could wait and see what happens with the Triangle parcel, and if the city is successful at acquiring that. So the city has been successful at that, and there's a potential borrow source there, but we need to do a couple things before we start mining material there. One is to get the topographic survey done, and there's an action item on that later here. And the second thing is to master plan the Triangle, because we don't want to do anything to the topography that would negatively impact the development of that site. And then we also need to confirm that the city actually owns it. But by waiting on that, there's about $150,000 savings, and I think I shared that number with the board before, so I still think it's a good strategy. It's kind of dragging things out. There will get to be a point, though, where Riviere can't wait any longer. I don't think that point is really, conceivably, it's not until next year. But when we get into March, they won't be able to wait any longer, and we'll have to move forward. But I don't think we'll be at that
Phil,
juncture.
just a quick question on that. So if you're going to wait to import the soil from the Triangle piece, that's basically the fill for blocks 1 and 2, is that correct?
Correct.
So will those sites not be ready till,
So the thing Commissioner Erman's talking about these two sites right in here. It's also Area 8 here.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, and some of this area will come in the next phase, but this is where we're focused right now. We're, in some areas, we're just this low. And it's not a significant amount that we're low. What will happen with Riviere's work, that they're going to start on infrastructure work. The first thing they'll do is sewer, because it's the deepest, so it doesn't affect that. The manholes will be sticking out of the ground more. There's a little bit of more disruption, because now when you start to fill that, you're filling around manholes, so there's a little bit more process and procedure. But they'll move on through their other work, and so we don't anticipate it holding up any of that work. The other part, just real quickly, I'll show you this picture here. This is a view, well, you guys know what we're looking at. We're kind of looking northeast. And the Triangle piece sits right in here. The low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that we believe will satisfy the fill requirements is kind of right in there. And that's not, really functional flat ground from the Triangle piece. The valuable area is up here. What our plan is, as soon as the topographic survey is done, we'll run through here and figure out how we can retain the top of bank, so the top of the slope, but get in here and mine this while retaining the stability of that slope. It does two things for us. It creates a little bit more flat area down here, which goes back to the Area 8 discussion. It also creates some flat area over here, which creates more sellable real estate for areas 2 and 3 in this area. And then we take that material and we bring it into the Phase 1 area. I think it's a pretty quick exercise, but I don't want to get ahead of myself and make a short-term decision that might negatively impact the Ignite in the long term for the sale of the area up in here or the city. That makes sense?
Does that cost include materials testing and everything else that would be involved?
Riviere's current contract has a materials testing provision in it, and they're just passing through the costs directly to Ignite. Partly because the materials testing was, how big a nut was that going to be? And it was really hard to put your finger on that. It ended up being a pretty significant effort down in here because we found a lot of unsuitable. So All West, the testing company, was down there quite a quite a bit, but they'll use all west up in this area as well.
All I would say really quick, and you're looking at the economics of this, is in today's real estate market, it doesn't take much land to add up to $150,000 right now. So I'm glad you're looking at the fact that we don't really want to take any usable land away up there. It wouldn't take too hard to equalize the cost of importing dirt.
That's a good observation. Yeah, that's a good observation. One of the things we've just struggled with a little bit is we're just blind here on the triangle piece because we don't have that topographic survey, and it's
Right.
important to be able to plan and make good decisions.
What's your time frame on that? I mean, I see it's an action item today. What's your time frame to have that completed?
So if the board authorizes it today, we'll have it completed by this time next week. Because we're kind of anticipating it, and I've blocked out a period of time for our survey crew to go do the work. And if we don't get authorized, we'll go do something else.
Now, that's including the tree study that you said in the report here you have to do also?
Yeah, we want to locate all the trees, because I think everyone can appreciate how sensitive tree removal will be on that slope. And so we want to be really surgical when we remove trees in that area. Okay. So the next one, item on here is a proposed amendment to La Riviere's Phase 1 contract. And so currently their contract completion date is May 1 of 2021. As we have been negotiating with the buyers, and I've been listening and participating in some of these discussions and working with Danielle and Tony, I started getting nervous because Ignite is making certain commitments to these buyers that are predicated on La Riviere accomplishing certain things. And I started getting worried that our teeth in our contract wasn't sufficient to motivate La Riviere. Partly, that's just, I guess I just worry about things like that. So I talked with Danielle and Tony about it and said, I'd like to chase this with a little bit with La Riviere and go in and put in an interim milestone on it. And then the discussion came up to also to put in a bigger, or add, we would say, consequential damages. And so I'll run out a scenario with the board. Danielle might need to help me a little bit on it because it starts to go outside my area of expertise. But the idea is to float this concept to the board, and if the board so authorizes, we would go finish the negotiations with La Riviere on this. So right now, in theory, La Riviere could do no work for the rest of this year, do nothing, start next year, say the snow clears off in March or April, they could start their work and they would have April to finish the job. March and April, let's say, 2 months. It's probably 2 months worth of work, but we technically don't have control over the way he does his work. That makes me nervous, partly because there's things happening in the pipe world with the hurricanes that the availability of pipe is diminished, water pipe, storm sewer pipe. So they can't manufacture it because the plants have been damaged. They've had this contract, so La Riviere actually has their pipe ordered. They just may not get it here in a timely way. It may show up later. I started talking to Tommy about this, and I said, I want to tie you into an interim deadline where you have the infrastructure completed before the snow flies this year. That was too aggressive for him because of the pipe issue that he's having, so he suggested February 1. And that's where I originally thought we would put a damage provision in there that said if that work wasn't done, there's the potential that the district may suffer consequential damages because, let's say, Bluegrass wants to sell their house to Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones can't get in there because we don't have water or sewer service or streets. As we talked some more about it, it makes more sense to push that damage day, or Tommy asked, why don't you just push that damage day to May 31st? And if I don't have it completed and the district suffers consequential damages, that's fine. He'll accept that term. So I still think we need to have an interim milestone. The interim milestone would have liquidated damages, which is like $1,500 a day, so he would still suffer some pain. And I think that's important to keep that pressure on, and he was willing to accept that. But the big damages, he did ask that they get pushed to May 31st. And I'll give you a more extreme example. The Chase Mixes, which is the entity that is working on this area up here, there's 84 units up there. So one can think about, they really hurry, they get all their permits, they go vertical, they finish that, and May 31, they got 84 units ready to rent, but the infrastructure isn't done, they can't get a CO. And they turn to Ignite and say, golly gee, I've got some serious damages here, and Danielle wants to be in the position to turn and look at La Riviere and say, you've got some serious damages here. So that's the concept, and I think, Danielle, did I capture most of it?
Yeah, I think that is it, that we would be able to contract on both sides so that the damages that were caused by any delay by T. Riviere would then be passed through to the applicable developer. We only have one developer who's really chasing us on this issue and is actually wanting it to be, they want some of it done before they even close on the property, so it could cause us damages on that front also, because we don't get our money, obviously, until they close. So I feel like we've come up with a pretty good solution. We're gonna have to put words around it now, which is always tricky, but.
Is
We
it
haven't even
delayed?
started work on the project, and we're already asking for a extension for a month.
That was the other part of it here. You're correct. As I was working through this with Tommy, there's obviously this back and forth that you start having the discussion of. And these are just general terms put to you all for consideration. You guys may say, gosh, we love the idea, but we don't want to give him another month.
Right.
He asked for it because he's getting pushed on this pipe issue, where he doesn't have the availability to the pipe, just because of the hurricane issue. That they're apparently is holding up. And I will say that is not, I haven't heard that just on this project. We have some other projects in Spokane that are, the owners, the districts, the water districts are deciding to postpone them because they don't want to open up the street and have the potential that they can't get the pipe available to go in the ground. So they don't want to tear up asphalt and not be able to do that.
I appreciate you watching out for us and thinking of this.
Mr.
You
Chairman.
know, whenever they mention Hurricane Katrina in the past, I usually have a flashback to a subdivision that couldn't get pipe. It does happen.
Yeah, we've been there yeah.
So there's only pipe made in one spot in the United States then?
No, there's,
I don't know, but
Louisiana.
there are shortages.
yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
China.
So, Mr. Chair, my question is if we get down to the road, they don't perform, do they put up a bond? How do we know, as an agency, know that they have the money to even pay any damages?
We are going to require that they cover their obligation to pay these damages with a bond, and T. Riviere said that they can do that. So that was actually, we got on the phone with one of my construction partners today to make sure that we had this kind of buttoned up, and that was the first thing he said. He said, well, it doesn't matter if he runs from town if we don't have a bond. So yeah, that will be covered.
Mr. Chairman, how do we quantify damages? So the soft damages for, when the clock starts February 1st and a daily, fee for not delivering, but how do we quantify the damages if we can't deliver for our developers? Is that a total amount of lost revenue, or is it prorated based on time?
So the way that I'm envisioning it right now is that we would have them have to prove up their damages. So
Okay.
we wouldn't give them, like a liquidated damages clause like you typically see in a construction contract. Right now, what do we have? $1,500 a day from Taylor Riviere in liquidated damages, but these are actual damages.
Okay.
So we would make them
Developer have to-
show us
okay.
what their damages were and then pass that through. And I do want to be clear that, when we go to the bonding company and say, give us all these damages, they're going to say, see you in court.
Yeah.
They're not going to just roll over and hand us a huge amount of money. So it's not like this totally solves the problem. There is still risk and delay, and Ignite could have to come out of pocket in the interim. But that's kind of the situation we're in, because we're selling it before the infrastructure's done, and the only other way to avoid that is to wait till Tommy performs. But that would, that takes us way off the timeline.
So this has been my concern from the beginning, so I really appreciate you guys looking into this. I think that the biggest thing right now are those dates. And so I think that we need to really be cognizant of those dates as, it's already put, like Scott said, it's already been pushed to May 31st at that point. If we can, I feel like we can mitigate some of our concerns if we push those dates back some. And I know that we're probably going to get some pushback from Tommy, but maybe there's got to be some give and take there.
Yeah, and that's the type of dialogue that I'm looking for here, is
Yeah.
that if that's the direction that the board, excuse me, wants to go to, is I'll go back and we'll look at that and have that discussion with them. I think the purpose was floating the idea here from the board. If you want me to try to push the finish date back 2 weeks, he started at May 1 was his original completion. We're asking for something more from him. And so part of the quid pro quo, to use the favorite term these days, is to give him something in exchange for that. And that's why we started at that May 31st. If the board says, let's go to May 15th, then we'll go back to that.
Yeah, because litigation costs are going to be a lot more.
Good point.
Phil, are we getting any pushback from the buyers for the delay?
Well, that's what I was going to say, maybe even in response to Olivia's comment about the dates, is that some of that depends on when we think the buyers are going to be ready to, because this doesn't really impact them until they're ready for C of O, right? So if we don't have the road infrastructure in or the water and sewer in when they're ready to, start either selling these to individual homeowners or, open up their multifamily project, that's when they're going to start to accumulate damages. So we really have to look at their timelines as compared to Tommy's timeline, right? That's where so I do think, particularly on the multifamily project, that we have room there because they are not going to be ready. That's not going to be constructed anywhere near May 31. Some of the single-family product is a little trickier. Their damages are going to be less, right? But that is a little trickier, and so we just have to. That's what we have to be mindful of, I think, is how those timelines come together and overlap, and whether or not we're going to be generating damages on the developer side. And like I said, one of those developers is really hard charging on this issue, and one of them so far isn't. But probably we'll get more that way.
And on our DDAs or agreements with them, are those timelines in those?
They have timelines for when they are, like they have an outside date for when they're required to close. And that's to protect us so that we get our funds on the timeline that we expect. And then from there, they have timelines for when they have to start and complete construction. We don't really have a timeline, at least in our form DDA that we are working with, they're pushing us in different directions with different contractors, but we are developers, but we don't have a timeline for when we have to deliver the infrastructure. But one of them has asked that we put that in, and that some of it be pre-closing, which, like I said, can create damage for us because it takes us off the timeline. And then one of them has said, well, if you don't deliver the infrastructure, then you're going to have to give me room on my timeline because I obviously can't move if you don't move. And that's very reasonable, I think.
Steve?
I guess from my perspective, because maybe we have a little bit of extension fatigue. And so from my perspective, there's been a little confidence lost in any of these dates because we've thrown out dates and then it's just extension. And so we say May 31st and we come in here April 1st. May 31st isn't going to work. It's going to be June 30. So there needs to be some confidence that rebuilt from my perspective that we can hit these dates, because how many extensions have we had so far? A few.
We've had two, and I think.
And so now it goes from COVID, and COVID has been an absolute disaster, right? It affected everyone. But now it's a new one on me. It's pipe,
Hurricane.
right? It's the hurricane. So what's
It'll be the fires.
the fires? Yeah. So and those could very well all be legitimate reasons, but I'm getting a little weary of extensions.
And you're identifying one of the things that I had lost sleep over and what generated this idea and why to bring it forward to the board. And part of the interim milestone here is making sure that the underground part of the project gets done, because that really becomes a bottleneck, because if you come out of the spring and you don't have the underground done, now you just have a lot of work to get done. And I agree with you. I almost said verbatim the same thing today when we were having this discussion, is that there's been a loss of confidence just on my part. And obviously, I'm the one standing in front of you folks. And we're out there, Bill and I are pushing on these guys as hard as possible. And when you get out there and there's 6 landscapers and you need 12, that generates a pretty, I was trying to think, I'm thinking of the diplomatic way to say it. It doesn't make for warm relations between Bill and I and the contractor. And we lay that on the table today, which they're working 7 days a week now. So I understand what you're saying, Mayor, and that's the origin of this.
And the park extensions, that was just a matter of, okay, the public can't use it, okay, we're extending it, the public can't use it. So the public, the city have been pretty patient. But here, in this situation, we're gonna have someone else breathing down our neck, and
This is no money.
they're not gonna be so patient.
Absolutely, and there's another nuance to this as well. In the park, there's an element of art in the park. When we get out there and Bill's walking at, and I'm looking at it, and we're out there with, and Tommy's part of the problem too, and some of the commissioners, we get out there and we're like, gosh, we could make this better by doing it this way. Well, let's go back. And do we have budget to do that? Yes, we do. Okay, let's put a concept together. Let's price the thing. Does it fit in? Well, we burned up 3 weeks doing that. And the park is better. Well, you know, I'm an engineer and I love infrastructure, but this is pretty boring. I mean, it's sewer in a straight line and, you know, there's not a lot of thing that's going to change here that needs Bill and I touching it. And so it's a valid point, and I'm glad to move forward with the dates that the board suggests here.
Brennan?
Do we have how many more expenses in the next 9 months are gonna be dependent on supply chain? I mean, is the pipes the end of it, or is there, because
Well, you
I
guys-
don't have confidence that the global supply chain or domestic supply chain is also gonna get better in the next 12 months. So can we address the supply chain issues on the front end so that then it's just work and labor time, or?
So that's another excellent point, and it's one, I had that same discussion with Laverier today. The reason that I want to put this interim milestone in there is it recognizes things that are manufactured elsewhere.
Okay.
So the ductile iron fittings, the PVC pipe, those are things that come from out of our area, and the manholes come from out of our area as well. But once you get through that, the only remaining thing that is kind of an off-site product is the cement material, the cement itself, that goes into the sidewalks and the curb and gutter. And we've actually had projects delayed because you couldn't get cement. But once we get past February 1st, the only kind of out-of-the-area supply chain is cement and oil for the asphalt, but I don't think we have an oil issue currently. So, and I have not heard about a cement issue, but as far as aggregates and road base and things like that, so we haven't heard an issue about that.
Levia?
Would it help to have an extension of the park to spring opening, to buy him some time to start this phase 1 work? I know it's probably different tasks, so it might not make sense, but
My suspicion is if we said, we want you to stop in the park and start on this project, he would say, I don't have a crew to put on this project. Because currently who he has on the park project is his landscaping crew. And I know some of his other crew that does this work, don't hold this against me, is on one of our projects in Spokane. So, so he has, and I know he's got a lot of work in other areas, so I think the short answer is that wouldn't gain us much.
other contractors.
I'm just thinking about all the projects we've done, and it's late September, and we're trying to hydro seed still.
That's not uncommon.
Never works. They gotta come back next year and do it again.
And Bill has been a pit bull on that topic, and really worked through the seeding formulations and all those things with the seeding supplier. I mean, Bill actually got the seeding supplier on the ground, looking at the dirt with us to make sure that the formulations that we're using in the short term, and then what's gonna come next year, because you're right, Chairman Hoskins, there is gonna be a reseed next year.
All the more reason to keep people out of there.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it should have been planted 2 months ago when it had a chance to grow and we were on schedule. but-
We are in agreement there.
I mean, there are other contractors out there.
That's, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have several action items here. If the board's done discussing, I'm still not clear on this last one here on the dates. Which dates are you
Well,
preferring?
are you done, Phil?
On this one, yeah, I've got 2 more, and I don't know if the chairman wants to handle them one at a time, or do you want to do them once I get through all of them?
So, Tony, what you're looking for is approval of the 2 amendments, is that correct?
Well, as Phil said, we can do these individually, or we can wait till the end and do all of them at the board's pleasure. I just wanted to make sure that we just didn't lose track of these. So if he wants to continue and get through all of them, then we can come back and do them individually, if that's your preference.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next one, and I might have, could have put this slide up earlier just to refresh the board's memory, what is involved with Phase 1. So the Lavier is currently under contract for that area in yellow to do the mass earthwork. So that was his amendment number 1. Amendment number 2 is the stuff that's kind of shown in here in yellow, pink, and it continues over to Suzanne. So this road, water, sewer, storm will get constructed, all the stuff that's shown in here in pink, and also the sewer line that extends from here another 1,500 feet to Shoreview. I could get into a bunch of boring details on how we might try to expedite the schedule by starting here. Normally, you start from the out and work in. In a case like this, when you're laying sewer line, we may work with Riviere. We'd have to get some grace from the city on the way we construct the sanitary in here to work from the inside out. We may look at that as a way to shorten up the schedule as well, so we can get these areas available. But that's what Phase 1 improvements are. And so the board's approved Livier's contract amendment none, which was earthwork. We watched the earthwork while we were out watching the park project. And so we would be over, because our observation guy was out there, our survey crew was out there, we could just bop back and forth and it wasn't a big deal. The park project's gonna end, and we need to, if we're gonna move on to watch La Riviere on the second page, or the second phase of their amendment number 2, and do that, all that infrastructure work, we need to have a construction phase amendment for Phase 1. And so those are all the construction phase services. You guys have the packet that shows all the details, and I've just kind of summarized it here. But it's us being out there doing the construction admin, the pay requests you see every month, the changes, the submittals, RFIs, all that stuff associated with it. And then I've just itemized each one of the items here. We're working with La Riviere to reduce, we worked with La Riviere to reduce the construction staking requirement, because he has some electronic abilities that some contractors don't have. And so that was an area where we found some savings in that Phase 1 item for construction staking. And then we have record drawings and post-construction phase services. So that's one action item on for the board's consideration. The next one is because of the triangle piece, which is great. But the triangle piece being in play potentially has impacts to Area 8, Areas 3 and 4 in here, and certainly the areas up in 11 and 9 up in this area. So Tony and I have been talking about this, and with Heartland and Hillary and kind of the whole team have been talking about this, that it may be appropriate, or probably is appropriate, for the board to step back and say, let's relook at this and figure out, should this road really look like this, or should this road change, and what should happen up in this triangle parcel? So the same process the board went through when we did the original project. What that involves, or what I'm proposing, and the board may say, no, we want to do this differently, but what I'm proposing is we develop 2 land use concepts, and because I was rushing and talking to attorneys on the phone, I left an "and" in there. I was working on this, Danielle, when we were talking on the phone. We developed 2 land use concepts, have some steering committee meetings, because the steering committee meetings that's been evaluating the RFP, they really have got their heads wrapped around the development. And so this is going to give them an opportunity to weigh in and start to shape what the rest of the development might look like with the triangle piece in play. And then I suggested to Tony that we have a board workshop where you guys can sit and just focus on this and ask us and Heartland and GGLO the hard questions. Why are you doing this? And then look at the financial part of it, where we would do a financial analysis. The other important component to this is actually going in and doing a little bit of preliminary engineering work to look at road grades and earthwork. And because this site moves vertically so much, anytime you change a road, it can have massive financial impact. So it's important to us, in order to give you accurate information, that we included that in there. So you can see the triangle topo in there, and then the master plan and financial analysis, that includes our fees, Heartland, GGLO, and a little bit of input from Bernardo Wills, the landscape architect on it, because they're gonna have some things to weigh in on it. So that's the second action item for the board's consideration, and I think that is it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. How closely does Heartland get involved with local real estate folks on the financial analysis?
You mean as far as mining information from them?
Right. What I'm wondering is, so where do they get their updated information on what land is going for? Because when you're doing a financial analysis, we're looking, okay, what can this stuff sell for, right? So it's the market value.
Yep.
Market value is, as we all know, changes from one month to the next. And so what are their sources for local, because you got to talk to the
Yep.
boots on the ground, right? What is their source for local information?
I will tell you what I saw in the model, and I think if, for anyone who has the model, when you go back into like sheet 14, they have all these comparables or comparables in there, and they have the source listed in there. And I don't know if they were talking to the realtor itself but it had the realtor companies in there. They had Zillow references in there. They had some other real estate reference in there. But Mayor, that's what I know that's what I saw in there. And I can ask Heartland. At the time we were doing this phase, I know they were talking to different realtors and showing them this picture and saying, what do y'all think that these parcels might sell for? So that's where that information came from. I know they reduced what the number was that they put in because they were trying to take a conservative approach on it. And I think you guys know Heartland lives in this kind of public realm world, and they're sensitive to the risk that public entities have in making decisions. And so they tend to, I think, decrease the sales values on what they're putting in their model. We obviously have more experience now that we've sold stuff in our.
I guess the problem being is that you want a great project. You want housing types and building types that fit in that area, but as well as you want to maximize the revenue that comes out of the project. If you take a conservative approach and that's what you base your RFPs, then the owners of this, which is the taxpayer, aren't maximizing what they could. Right?
That's a good observation.
And
Yeah.
so I just want to make sure that when we go through the next phase, that we're really closely looking at that. And for myself, I don't like I like a realistic approach when it comes to this, and not a conservative approach.
And I think that information is in the model, though, because literally they had the estimated market value, and then down in the spreadsheet, there was a discount that they put in there, and you could sit there and play with the discount, and it would update the model. And so we could literally work through and put that up on the whiteboard, and you guys could say, don't put any discount in, let's see what it looks like. And we could go through some of those scenarios. The other thing that's a little bit unique to the city and Ignite, though, is that the initial short-term sale is not the end of the story for you, right? The property value is really the potential revenue generator from a tax increment standpoint. So weighing both of those things, and you and I have had that same discussion before, because there's also some short-term obligations that the city has with the wastewater department, I think, so.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Phil, just on that same subject, so if you're looking at selling these as blocks like we have been, versus, there's been some discussion kind of, recently about going smaller sales sides, how much is being factored in, particularly if we're going to remodel this at this point in time, because before we were always looking at the block structure, and then that would be our revenue source versus letting the developer take it to the next level.
So, and you're right, and there's probably three big topics I wanted to talk about in that workshop that I mentioned earlier, and that was one of them. How does the board wanted to dispose of these? The way that we did it in this time is we're selling them at a block, and we told the developer, you can buy the block and you can go divide it up in the number of lots you want, and as long as it's consistent with the development standards, and it's yours, off you go. As we started getting through that process, and we were looking at the prospect of potentially having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different developers in there, all potentially with 7 different teams, all interacting with us, plating and infrastructure, the horror kind of set upon us, which we knew that going in as we started getting further and further into it, which is why the idea developed of, let's offer up to the developers that Ignite take the lead on that. They'll pay for it, but there'll be one-stop shopping that we take care of it. And we've done that, and the developers have actually been happy. They're like, fine, if you want to go work through the city, knock yourself out. Go do that. And so we've done that. They've paid for it. I think one of the things for the board to consider in the future is you offer that up at the RFP level. And so just in that step alone, it seems like you're going to get a higher value. You can still sell them the block, but you'll tell them, we'll divide it up into the lots. Like, for instance, this one right here, you might say in Area 3, we're gonna divide it for you, and we're gonna sell you all of them, which is one end, or we're gonna sell you half of them, or in the extreme case, we're gonna sell them at the lot level. And I think there's some challenges with all those scenarios, which we would hash out in that workshop, so you can see the trade-off, the financial trade-off, and the administrative burden trade-off.
Phil, I guess my question is if we wait till that, if we're going to take the scenario down to that level, to that small of a distribution level, there's a lot of consequences. I mean, I look at what Tony and Danielle are going through right now, dealing with 3 developers versus, 15 or 20 or 18 or whatever we're going to have out of this thing when we start breaking these into smaller blocks and having to deal with each one of those teams. I think if we use a scenario where we take it that small and bring it to the workshop, that might almost be too late. I mean, the cat's somewhat out of the bag at that point in time.
Well, I don't think you would have committed to anything. Because what we intend to do, if we get cut loose on this, is we're going to get after this. I anticipate having a workshop in, late October, first part of November. And then we kind of work through some of the schedule earlier. The RFP that may have 3, 4, and potentially the triangle, depending on the way the group feels about it and how the infrastructure is related to it, that could be rolled out in January. So that's kind of the time frame we're thinking of. But it's an important topic. The other end of we're talking about the DDA method of property disposition. There's also just the high bid method. Just plat it out. The district agency says, we're just going to plat the whole thing out, and we're going to sell the lots out, and whoever the highest bidder is, we're going to give it to them, and go knock yourself out. You're going to go build some weird modernistic house.
We lose total control.
We lose, which implies we can try to tighten the control up by developing architectural standards, but you lose control of the time frame to some extent too. And you're going to tell me, no, by golly, Phil, you're going to build a house next year, and I'm going to say, yep, I am. I don't do it. The remedies become challenging. So now Danielle's chasing people to force them to build. So I think it's all those elements that need to be discussed in a workshop where you guys can see the financial trade-offs, the administrative trade-offs, and make an informed decision.
Well, I look forward to the workshop then, because I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
unknowns out there at this point in time.
And again, we're going to have some steering committee advice headed up to that, and I don't know if that changes at all, but the group that we've had so far has been really participatory and had really good insights that reflect the community, which I think was the whole objective of folks being on it.
I think the maximum amount of return we'd get is retailing the lots, but we had a small sample of what that's like on Park Drive. That's a lot of management.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I understand that it's a lot of work, but it's not like we can't bring in and contract out other people to help with that work. I mean, if you can make $1 million and we have to contract out and have $100,000 worth of help, I'm sure there's some people that we could get to help us through the process.
That's part of the discussion, Steve, obviously.
I think that's really worth it. And I think we have to acknowledge that, and I readily admit that it's a learning process, and we learned through the first process. But I think that the first process, we left some money on the table.
And those are some of the things.
A considerable amount.
I agree.
But that's a learning process, and I'm good with that. But I think we take that process and we learn as we go into the next phase.
And I think you're right. I think the trade-offs are, I mean, I just look at the amount of work that Tony and Danielle are putting in on this project right now, and Phil and the rest of the team. And, the other part of the team is we hired them to do this. That's part of it. I don't think we hired Danielle and Tony to be real estate managers at this point in time.
No, but there are people that do that.
No, I agree.
And you can hire them.
And that's part of this discussion. And that's where I'd like to go with this.
Yep.
Is let's look at the trade-offs. There's economic trade-offs, there's administrative trade-offs, and let's make sure that we understand as a board all of the various trade-offs and then make the best decision.
And the other big one to remember is there's the neighborhood trade-off. The city and the agency get one opportunity to make a cool neighborhood and make it special and make it, what we all envisioned it to be at the very beginning. And we don't want to lose, I think that needs to be a value that always bears through our discussions that we have here.
But you do that through design standards.
You
right?
do, and architecture, you can,
And that's
Yep.
another avenue they take, and design standards and all that stuff costs money, but that goes into that financial analysis. And if you bring in administrative help, and let's just throw out the number that, okay, we bring in $100,000 for administrative help, and we have X amount, let's just throw in another $100,000 for
Yep.
design standards, so that's $200,000. So if you spend $200,000, but you bring back $1 million, you accomplish everything you wanted to accomplish.
Right.
You get the administrative work, you get the design standards you want, but the net gain is $800,000.
And I'm not arguing against that, Steve, you understand that. I just think we need to know all the facts.
A lot of developers develop a subdivision and then they keep it for themselves, like a lot of these big builders. But I've seen developers develop subdivisions, and then when they say retail them out, it'll be something like maybe you have to buy a minimum of 5 lots, not one lot or something, but then smaller builders can buy it. But you do have an architect control committee or design standards and that sort of thing, and it does work. We could do that. I think one key we learned on Park Drive is when we do this, we had a lot of hands from different departments in the city into Park Drive, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but just by the nature of being a city, we had a lot of hands from different departments complicating that thing. So if this is more turnkey and cleaner, like a private developer would do, that could work. We probably left money on the table just because of the fact the market's gone up since we auctioned the lots off, but that, you can't do anything about that.
all the topics that are being discussed here by the board are the ones we intend to try to load up the scales, so to speak, and then you all get to decide which way that scale is going to tip. But our job will be to load up, and just the mayor's illustration about what's an architectural standard cost and how does that change in the lot sale. We'll try to estimate those things with Heartland so you guys can look at the implications of those things.
Sounds like the timeline's about as quick as it can, and I do like the idea. We're all over the place with this, and to know that we can come there and kind of set some of the other, and just focus on this thing at that time. And you'll have that much more information even in that short of time. So, yep, I too look forward to that discussion.
Okay?
One thing that I would just add that I sort of lose sleep on is the loss of control for land banking. Because if we sell it individually or in smaller blocks and we don't have the DDA to control the timing and the market turns, we could end up sitting with lots of bare ground over there, which really takes us off track on the timeframe for collecting tax increment. So I think that's something that we really need to take into consideration as we're looking at the different options too. There's a lot more risk, I think, associated with not using the DDA structure
But
from
it's
a
also-
timing perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, but it's also not an all or nothing deal. It's not like Ignite has to say, we've decided we're going to sell every single lot as a single lot, or we're going to sell everything at a DDA. You may say, golly gee, we want to sell this area as a single-family lots and put it out to the highest bidder, and we want to sell the rest of these at a DDA. And that's, again, one of the elements we want to bring forward for you all to think about and help, advance this forward in the most positive way possible that achieves all our objectives.
And I think even if we retail it, like Steve's talking about, to get the maximum return for the taxpayers, we're not going to drag this on. We put this in smaller blocks that we can retail it out, and we get rid of it. We're not going to. We're not looking at a 2-year timeline to sell lots onesie twosies, but we get it. We retail it in smaller groups of lots that smaller builders can buy. one thing, sometimes when you get, if you have good design standards and architect control, you get a little more variety in the neighborhood than having one developer build every single house too, so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good points all the way around the
Okay.
table.
Do we, oh,
Go
it's
ahead.
actually probably for the steering committee, just about other master communities like Forest Heights and Portland, where there are smaller retail subdevelopments within that master development, and then there are big ones, and so what was their process for determining when to go big and when to go small?
And we had those discussions with Heartland and GGLO with the first steering committee. There was a couple of, there's been a life of the steering committee, but the very first steering committee that shaped this one that you're seeing on the screen, we had some of those discussions, and Don Vagey brought forward some illustrations, and Matt Anderson from Heartland described some of the disposition scenarios that they've dealt with, and we actually talked about a lot of these trade-offs. I don't think that they were as real to the board, because it's not something we deal with on a day-to-day basis, or you deal with it on a day-to-day basis. Now that we've lived through one, and as the mayor pointed out, we've saw some of the economics of it, that's why as Tony and I talked about this and looked at the triangle piece coming in, it's like we need to step back and revisit all the topics that have been discussed there, including the one you just mentioned, Commissioner Randell, is finding out what the disposition processes are on big scale or small parts of it. Can we do them differently, and what are the effects of that?
Phil, can you quickly summarize the three action items that you have in front of
Yes,
us?
sorry, I know we, so,
How about I help you out
okay,
here, Phil?
thank you.
So, the first motion needed by the board, if you agree, is for Amendment 12 to the Welsh-Comer contract, which involves the land use planning for the triangle piece as well as the rest of the Atlas Mill site in the amount of $39,200. That one there. Yep.
You say that was Amendment 12?
That would be Amendment 12 to the Welsh-Comer contract.
I make a motion, we approve Amendment 12, the Welsh-Comer contract.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thanks.
The second motion to be considered by the board would be for Amendment 13 to the Welsh-Comer contract in the amount of $244,500 to perform the construction phase services and record drawings related to Amendment 2 of the La Riviere contract as Mr. Boyd has shared.
That's amends the contract?
This is Amendment 13 to the Welch-Comer contract, so it's just in addition to the existing professional services agreement with Welch-Comer for them to provide the management services, basically to oversee Tommy's $2.3 million contract that the board awarded last month.
I move that we approve the Welsh-Comer Amendment number 13.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Just a question.
Oh, just a second.
All of this is in the budget, right? In our, it's budgeted amounts in there.
But this is not the 1 month extension.
That's the next one.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
And the final action to be considered by the board would be to address La Riviere's Amendment number 2 contract milestone conversation that the board conversed on quite a bit here a little while ago. So you just need to kind of set any parameters that you'd like to have and address this question to the board.
I would suggest to look at the project schedules a little bit more closely and with the developers and get a more maybe realistic, give us a little bit of cushion.
Perhaps bring Tommy in? Is that possible?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I was saying perhaps bring Tommy in to speak, to answer some questions.
Or even if you guys, I mean, we could direct you to work with them to refine the dates to make it.
That's fine. If the board wants to delegate that authority to the staff to work with our consultants and the contractor, we can do that. Or I think the question that Mr. Boyd presented to you, do you want to set the date? So it's your call, however you want to proceed.
I would just add that the dates are not going to line up perfectly. 2 out of 3 of the contractors, I think, are at a longer time frame, and we should be fine. But one of them, is probably going to be waiting on us.
That's
Right?
the one I would go off of.
That's the intent, that they're not waiting on us, is when Mrs. Jones is ready to move in, she's got a paved street in front of her house, and the city is signed off on the infrastructure improvements and her house, obviously. Back to Commissioner Metz's point, what we could do is talk to that particular developer, look at their scenario. I think, based on the dates I've heard them talk about, they're not going to be ready to move Mrs. Jones in until June or July. Because I think they have what they've said, their design time and city approval time to get a building permit on a house. It would be awesome if you could get it done in that time frame, what they described to me. So I think we will be done by May 31st, but we could go back and confirm that and get a hard schedule out of them.
I'd be more comfortable with May 1st, but.
And what's the quid
I
pro
would like
quo?
to have you work with the contractor or the
Quid
developer
pro
too.
quo.
Only for the fact is, I think these are pretty, I agree with the rest of this group. I mean, we've been changing these like,
Yeah.
they're like butter.
Well, the challenge with this one now is that we can't afford to offer an extensions because we will be jeopardizing land closings, which are millions of dollars to our effort. And so we can't go through this process, and that's why the hard dates.
Exactly.
Steve?
So, Phil, you know this project inside and out. You've dealt with Tommy a lot. Do you feel comfortable with the dates proposed? Would you suggest that we could tighten it up? I mean, we're dependent on you to give us the,
Yeah, and I honestly, and I'm dependent on you guys to give me a certain level of marching orders. Based on just the feel I have from the board and my own observations, I would go back to May 1st on it. And then start to find ways to modify the construction sequence, which probably involves me going back and talking to the city in the wastewater department about how we do certain things in order to allow Tommy to get to that earlier construction date. And so, yeah, we hold him to a date, but we also help him work on some of the permitting parts of it that would allow us to get to that date sooner. So the offsite improvements get done last instead of first.
Well, but he's done projects before, and he knows the contract date. He can't figure that out?
The contractors have less pull over having a dialogue with the city, because the city has a standard, and this is not, I don't want to generalize the city folks, but generally speaking, they have a standard, and your obligation is just meet the standard. City of Coeur d'Alene requires sand collars in the manhole, period. That's it. We don't deviate from it. Well, in this one manhole, can we change and do something different here? And if you're allowed a couple of deviations, it can literally change, the way that the project is constructed.
So these are deviations to help him.
Yes, which
So
in
then the
turn.
May 1st date should be sooner.
Thank goodness we have the mayor on our side.
Yeah, I think that the May 1st date would be more attainable. It would give Tommy a reason to back up to May 1st or do sooner. I don't know that we're going to gain another month out of him and get him in April, because at that point, we have a weather issue. Just starting, that's the risk of spring starts on things.
We have a
But
very
the
strong,
infrastructure would be done already, so,
sounds like May 1st is where
yeah.
we're at. That's,
I would
go with
just-
it.
Can I interject for just a second? I mean, I'm fine with asking for whatever date you guys want to, but we're asking for a big thing from him and asking him to commit to taking on those damages in not even knowing what they are from the developers on the other side. And I think it's going to be really hard to say, oh yeah, we're actually sticking with the date and we want you to take all these damages. We want to pass all the damages straight through. So I just want to be realistic about what that looks like. I mean, we can bring back to you whatever we come out with, and I'm totally comfortable to do that. We'd have to have a special call, but I don't see us getting both of those things.
Might be May 15th then.
So I think I'd like to make a decision. I hate kicking decisions down the road. So Phil, did I hear you correctly that you feel that we could accomplish this with the May 1st date?
If we get some accommodations out of the city.
But Daniel, you're saying you don't think we can get the May 1st date and the damages both?
I mean, I would put that question to Phil. He's the one that's working with Tommy every day, but I feel like that's going to be a big ask.
I think we need to make sure we get the damages covered.
Because I would agree with Chairman or Commissioner Arman that because the likelihood that we're not going to hit May 31st, I think, is pretty low. I like pushing back and having a month of float in a project like this. But if I had to choose between asking for May 1st and having a smaller damage access versus Danielle's observation that we get May 31st and the damages, and right now, these are the dates that cities looked at, and he said, I agree to consequential damages or direct damages, whatever Ignite incurs after May 31st.
So technically, the damage provision is for February 1st, though, right?
No, that was before I finished my negotiations with him as I was
okay.
walking in the door, and Danielle was whispering to me saying, no, you need to get it on this date. But I had written my slide prior to that, so
Okay.
very good catch. It is, the damage provision is moved down to here, because this is the more meaningful one. This one will have liquidated damages to
Gotcha.
it. Because I think it's important that we still keep the pressure on him, and he's forced to get the infrastructure in the ground. I didn't talk about the weather protection, but he's willing to also take on the cost of the weather protection, which can be a substantial burden if we end up with 3 feet of snow.
Well, I would make a motion that we accept the Phase 1 infrastructure contract with Tela Revere with a May 31st, 2021 completion,
With a damage provision?
with the damage provision. Yes, correct.
I will reluctantly second that.
How about we do May 15th with the damage provision?
I don't like
This
that.
is,
Or you can just delegate to Tony to negotiate the best date that we possibly can with all the damages covered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
With the city too, I mean, if the city can
yeah, but what if that
accommodate some
date's
of
June
the.
then?
Not to exceed
not
May
exceed
31.
31st, yeah.
Not to exceed, yes.
Something to make it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I would go with that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I second that.
Our staff's best guess is the developer wouldn't be ready, I mean, the developer, the apartments wouldn't be ready by May 31st anyway. So we're not saying if this isn't done by the 31st, we got damages,
But we may on the single family.
possibly on a single family, okay?
So if I understand the motion, it's by Commissioner Arman, second by Commissioner Whitmire, to approve the proposed Riviera Amendment Number 2, Atlas Project Phase 1 contract milestones with damage provisions. So the February 1st, 2021, it stays in there, and May 31st, 21 stays in there. Now, is that what you want to set, or do you want to delegate us to
We said
negotiate?
we would delegate you to negotiate the best dates not to exceed May 31st, based upon the damages that they will accept also. So we'll give you some leeway.
Gotcha.
Okay. We there?
I'm there.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Besides me? Obviously, he knows that we're not happy with him.
Bill can provide some other context, but I think
I
we
mean,
made it
Do we need to
abundantly
get him
clear.
here and tell him that face to face, or?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly can. I actually thought about having Tommy come.
Much rather him working, though.
Yeah, it's, and.
He's not the one working, he
That's
needs
true.
one that.
And again, we talk about the contractor being delayed, and on the infrastructure part, like I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of room for creativity there. One of the things the grace that Tommy gets out of both Bill and I and the board is the fact that he is so willing to be creative on the park, and it is a better project because of him, because a lot of contractors wouldn't have done that. They just would have said, yep, Bill, we're glad to do that for you, but let me get my change order book out here, and we'll start right now. This walk was 10 minutes.
Yeah, but look what it gets him, though. He gets all these delays, though.
Exactly, but
So-
but on the flip side, the city and Ignite get a project that is better than what it could
Yeah.
have been, because there's these elements, these creative elements that Bill was able to put into it with input from us, and it's a kind of it's a little bit of a design build element, and sometimes it takes more time, but.
We've created an expectation with him that the timeline really doesn't mean anything.
Well, and that's the expectation that this is the whole point of this, Chairman Hoskin, is that's why I want to change that expectation. Because I felt the same exact thing, and I was losing sleep over it, and started talking to Tony about this, and when we got going on it, and that's why Tony said, let's bring it to the board and put this in, make it abundantly clear that those days are gone on phase one. So.
Okay.
I
And we do
what you're
appreciate
saying.
his flexibility and his creativity.
Yeah,
But
but-
he is earning millions of dollars.
We really appreciate his time.
That's it, those are all good points.
Tony, next topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Midtown Ventures LLC
Thanks,
project.
Phil.
A&E extension, Fourth Amendment. As I shared with you, the developers asked that we extend the A&E agreement for the Midtown project from September 16th to October 21st, giving them basically one more month to kind of get the information together for the appraisal, to issue their reused appraisal. It's taken longer than they thought. But they say they're making progress. So I'm asking the board to consider an additional Fourth Amendment extension to October 21st, 2020.
It's that extension word again, Scott.
Extension fatigue.
We talked about that in Finance Committee. What happens if this project doesn't go forward and we just, the
But
property
we have
goes?
been working on this for a dozen years.
Right, the project,
What's a
the property goes to the city.
It's the only project that's been accepted so far.
And I agree. They've been working on this and they've been diligent about it, and this is just taking more time. They're just crunching the numbers right now, is what they're doing. I would make a motion to approve the Fourth Amendment to the Midtown Ventures LLC project.
Second.
Must be related to Tommy Riviera. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks.
Final topic for me, Mr. Chairman, is the continuing board agenda item for Ignite CDA support for emergency economic community needs. Once again, this is a recurring agenda item for board discussion.
I would just add that last night at our council meeting, we had quite a bit of discussion about community development block grant that the city is getting that is really targeting exactly on some of what I think the intent of this was, and having to do, that one was specifically with what we approve for child care assistance, but then talking about the whole cluster of, housing, rental assistance, and all of that. And and we really encouraged our development specialist to, take a look at anything that comes along, and they will be letting their different partners know, because, we didn't approve much at all last night, and we have a lot left over in that pot. And then starting in 2 weeks, 1st of October, she said they just found out they're getting getting about another 300,000 that can be targeted for that. So just to be aware that there's potentially, not just potential, there's a lot of help available, and we're going to really be trying to push that out. So.
Thank you very much.
Then I had one just other, Tony, a question just to, somewhat related to the last item, but as far as the parking lot improvement and all of that in the Midtown, is that at all tied to what's going on with, that project, or are we going ahead with that, redoing the parking lot and lighting improvements and all that, which needs to happen anyway? But.
They're still kind of tied together, because we don't want to spend money that's going to kind of get ripped up if certain footprints need to be established and it'll widen. So we're still kind of holding off on that. The commitment's there to partner with the city for those improvements, but we just want to make sure that we don't spend money that is going to be impacted by this project. So once we get this project finalized and the footprint identified, then we can move forward.
But we're on the home stretch.
Yes.
Okay.
We've been on the home stretch for a while.
And, Mr. Chairman, I might add, there could be some coordination, too, of that construction project with some other things that we may want to do. We have that additional land that we have made available for parking, so there could be some coordinated efforts
Yeah,
that may.
I think that'd be a great
lead to
idea.
Yeah,
Some savings there.
Do it all at once.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
And can you talk a little bit about, it's kind of the same topic, the arts grant that was mentioned last week that Sarah's been involved with? She couldn't make it tonight, but.
Yeah, the arts grant that the board discussed, the Arts Commission grant award that the board discussed here recently, they will be bringing proposals to the October board meeting. I think she shared with us there's 4 proposals that they received that I think they're going to vet, and they are going to bring recommendations and presentations to the board at the October 21st board meeting.
She said they had 9 total, and then they've fair to the mountain we're going to bring
Four.
forward. So that worked pretty good. Okay. Are you out of breath yet?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion, being as it's time for elections, that we reappoint, or re-elect, I guess is a better way to put it, you as chairman and Ms. Metz as vice chairman for the next 2021 year.
I'll second that.
We're going to get out of 2020 soon.
Oh, gosh, please.
I would like to add that I think that's a great idea for this extension of time.
In the spirit
This
of,
extension.
yeah.
This is the best extension we had today.
Any other positive comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
You can't vote, so.
Thank you.
Board commissioner comments.
I would like to make one comment. I just think we as a board should be aware of the amount of time that Tony's putting into these projects. And, Danielle also. I mean, we see it when we see, the billings, but I think we're probably getting the deal of the century on billings from Danielle's firm. But I think this is something that we went into a little blind, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see what the workload is. And I just want to, as a board, just say, our gratitude to both of those for the time and energy and dedication they're putting in to make this project what it is.
I totally agree. And I think the meeting that Phil was talking about having is going to help in that.
I agree.
And it seems like we kind of dabbled our toe in this, and now getting another meeting like that to play with those numbers and stuff, I think is going to be beneficial. Now we'll know what we're talking about, or know what we're looking at anyway. Thanks for that. Any other board commissioner comments? Now I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session
So moved.
in
Second.
accordance with Idaho Code Section 74-206, subsection 1B, to consider the evaluation of the Ignite CDA Executive Director.
Roll call, Mandel?
Yes.
Metz?
Yes.
Harmon?
Yes.
Whitmire?
Yes.
Jordan?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes,
Tackett? Yes.
we're in executive session. That's a wrap. Yes.